July 2nd, 2005. A man named Paul Klebnikov, American journalist and editor of Forbes Russia, is gunned down outside his office in Moscow. 9 shots. Broad daylight. No robbery. No warning. The gunmen escape. The motive? He had published an investigation into Russia's new oligarchs and how they built empires on the ashes of organized crime. His murder wasn't a surprise, just another reminder that in the new global order, the lines between mafia and market are thin, sometimes non-existent. In Russia, in Brazil, in Dubai, in London, the cartels no longer just sell drugs, they buy banks, launder fortunes, fund elections, smuggle people, invest in ports, farms, servers. We think of organized crime as something underground, hidden. But what if the real danger isn't what's hidden? It's what has been legalized, normalized, franchised. What if crime didn't infiltrate the economy, but became the economy? That's the question behind McMafia, the book that shows how globalization didn't civilize the underworld. It gave it passports, accountants, and stock options. McMafia isn't a thriller. It's not fiction. It reads like a travelogue, but every destination is real. Every name is documented. Every murder, traceable. British journalist Misha Glenny spent years tracing the movement of money, drugs, weapons, and people across 35 countries, from the Balkans to Tokyo, from Johannesburg to Toronto. The title, McMafia, isn't ironic. It's precise. Glenny's central argument is this: organized crime now functions like a franchise. Independent networks copy each other's methods, hire the same consultants, use the same shell companies, and exploit the same deregulated markets. They don't need to meet. They just need to imitate. The book opens in Eastern Europe after the fall of the Berlin Wall. When communism collapsed, borders opened, but institutions didn't catch up. Police forces were weak. Courts were corruptible. Private fortunes could be built overnight if you knew who to bribe or who to kill. Glenny shows how the initial power vacuums in Russia, the Balkans, and Ukraine were filled not by democratic entrepreneurs, but by smugglers, arms dealers, and human traffickers. And from there, the network spread, finding partners in the West, laundering money through London banks, investing in Miami real estate, and selling narcotics in Johannesburg. What Glenny reveals is more terrifying than a cartel, because there's no single villain, just opportunity. The system isn't broken, it works perfectly for those willing to ignore the law. McMafia isn't about gangsters hiding in shadows. It's about how they stepped into the light and we let them. The most disturbing idea in McMafia isn't that organized crime exists. It's how seamlessly it integrates into the world we call legitimate. Glenny tells of a Czech brothel chain run by former intelligence officers, of a human trafficking ring in Israel that auctioned Eastern European women as sex slaves with price tags based on nationality. In Dubai, gangsters live in skyscrapers. In Nigeria, oil is stolen directly from pipelines by syndicates who bribe local soldiers. In Colombia, paramilitaries invest drug profits in cattle ranching. In Japan, Yakuza own real estate companies. In the UK, former KGB men use shell firms to buy up Kensington apartments. The list is endless. And legal, enough. What unites these actors isn't ideology. It's logistics. Glenny shows how mafias evolved into service providers. They specialize in transporting, concealing, laundering, and enforcing. A Mexican cartel may move drugs, but the shipping container is handled by a legal freight company, the payment cleared by a reputable offshore bank, the profits reinvested in real estate that no one questions. One chilling anecdote stands out. A Bulgarian mobster explains that corruption isn't a glitch, it's the business model. If the West wants cheap goods, he says, it has to accept cheap labor. And if you want cheap labor, you need someone willing to smuggle humans. McMafia forces you to ask, where do you draw the line between crime and commerce? When a government official sells visas for profit, is that bribery or business? When a luxury brand uses subcontractors who use forced labor, is that a crime or globalization? Glenny doesn't moralize. He documents. And what he documents is a world where legality is just one currency among many. Not the strongest, not the most profitable, and, increasingly, not the most respected. The rise of globalized crime didn't happen in secret. It happened in plain sight during trade summits, market reforms, post-war reconstructions. In Glenny's view, the explosion of transnational mafias was not the byproduct of failed states. It was the consequence of deregulated markets meeting fragile democracies. In the 1990s, Eastern Europe opened up overnight. But banks came before laws. Credit flowed before courts were functional. Western governments pushed for liberalization, but didn't stay to build institutions. The result was power vacuums into which smugglers, warlords, and opportunists rushed. But what began in the post-Soviet world didn't stay there. Once these networks had logistics, they needed scale. And scale required the West. London bankers, Swiss lawyers, American lobbyists, Israeli telecom firms. The clean hands that made dirty money invisible. Glenny shows how global cities became epicenters not of justice, but of laundering. From Panama to Zurich to New York, the same tools used for legal finance, offshore accounts, shell corporations, nominee directors were used to conceal trafficking profits, tax fraud, and political bribes. And then came the internet. Suddenly, geography stopped mattering. A gang in Bulgaria could coordinate a ransomware attack on a hospital in Canada, demand payment in crypto, launder the earnings in Southeast Asia, and reinvest it in property in Portugal without leaving home. What exploded wasn't just crime, it was efficiency. Digital tools made mafia operations faster, leaner, and borderless. And the pandemic accelerated everything. With global enforcement focused on health, cybercrime skyrocketed. Dark web markets flourished. Human trafficking rerouted through supply chains. And all of it looked like business as usual. Glenny doesn't say crime took over the world. He says the world adapted to crime. And in that world, impunity isn't the exception, it's the business model. McMafia doesn't just trace the anatomy of crime. It traces the complicity of civilization. Glenny doesn't present mafias as outsiders, he presents them as co-authors of modern life. Not the rot beneath the system, but the lubrication that makes it run smoother. We like to believe corruption happens far away, in weak states, among desperate people. But Glenny shows that every corner of the globe has its version of organized illegality. And often, the line between us and them is not morality, it's paperwork. A Western CEO who uses tax havens may never meet a Colombian drug lord. But both depend on the same network of ghost companies, complicit banks, and offshore facilitators. What separates them is only which crimes get punished, and which get filed under strategy. McMafia suggests that the 21st century won't be defined by ideology, but by informal power, by invisible empires that govern through contracts no one reads and violence no one admits. Glenny isn't nostalgic for the past, he's alarmed by the future. And maybe the most disturbing part is this: we already adapted. We scroll past reports of money laundering. We shop from brands tied to exploitation. We vote for candidates funded by opaque donations. We don't see mafias. We see convenience. In the world of McMafia, the question isn't whether you're part of the system. It's whether you're willing to admit it. There's a reason Glenny chose the name McMafia. Not because crime got more brutal, but because it got more efficient, more scalable, more integrated into the systems we already trust. Banks, elections, logistics, phones, and maybe that's what makes it untouchable. Not its secrecy, but its familiarity. The mafia didn't disguise itself to look like us. We evolved to look like it. So the next time you hear about corruption, trafficking, or offshore fortunes, don't look away. Don't assume it's someone else's world. Because the truth is simple. You're already inside it. If this disturbed you, share it. Someone you know still believes the world is clean. And if you want more books that uncover what polite society hides, subscribe. And if you want to see what happens when conspiracy becomes diplomacy, watch our investigation into Trump's accusation of white genocide in South Africa and the two books that weaponized it.